Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am playing Moltres today in a solo run. This should be excellent. I love playing legendary Pokemon. As we get started, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out. Thank you so much, all of you, for your support. You are awesome. Now, some people may consider Moltres the worst of the legendary birds. I always really liked the design as a kid. I just love fire-type Pokemon. I always had an affinity for that. So I wanted to give it a fair shot and see how it would do. It does have an interesting starting moveset here with Fire Spin as its main fire move. The legendary birds all have very similar stats, but not quite exactly the same. Moltres has a base 100 attack, which is actually higher than the others, and a lower speed stat than Zapdos. The excellent 125 special is incredible, but is going to be held back a little bit by Fire Spin. Now there is another problem with starting with Fire Spin, and that is the extra turns it takes to knock out a Pokemon. These multi-turn moves are not optimal for the best speedrunning strategies. It's really better to knock out a Pokemon in one hit whenever you can. I accidentally walk into the grass and encounter a Pidgey really early, right before I get into the forest, but that actually works out because I can catch it as my fly user. I know that Moltres can learn fly, but I wanted an option so I didn't have to teach it, just in case I wanted the move slot for something else. In Gen 1, there's no move deleter or any way to change out the moveset from HMs, so I would have been stuck with fly as soon as I used it. We named Pidgey Jimmy after Jimmy C, who was very supportive in the comments. Thank you so much. We are going to be highlighting some commenters today, so if you want to get in one of these videos, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment, and I will keep my eye out for all of you wonderful people. Now, one problem with the legendary birds and all the legendaries in Gen 1 is that they are all the slow growth rate. While they have excellent base stats, they're going to take forever to level up in the early game, so I'm going to need to fight more trainers. Now, granted, these early bug-type Pokemon are really quick to knock out with Peck and with Fire Spin, excellent typing for the early game. Now, you think this would be an awful matchup for Brock. Both fire and flying are weak to rock types, and they're not very effective. But both of Brock's Pokemon have very low special, so Fire Spin actually does decent damage, plus it traps in Gen 1, so they are not able to do anything, and I can just knock them out. This is the benefit of having a special move into this fight. Any not very effective physical moves are going to be just tough to get through this fight very quickly. Often Pokemon need level 15 or higher if their only attacking moves are a physical low power move. Out here on Route 3, I'm actually able to fight this bug catcher with 4 bugs on his team, but since Moltres has guaranteed knockouts on his Pokemon, he's actually really fast. Was Moltres your first legendary bird that you ever saw? I know that the other two, Zapdos and Articuno, are kind of in more hard to get to locations. Zapdos is only found in the power plant and Articuno is only found on the Seafoam Islands. Both of these locations are pretty out of the way and you may not even need to go to these places in order to beat the game. Now, while Brock wasn't that bad, Misty is going to be a big problem. Her Pokemon have super effective damage, so I do not want to fight them until I have to. So we're going to go to the rival first with Moltres, but his team is actually pretty easy. We don't have any big type weaknesses here, and while Sandshrew can use Sand Attack, we can actually dodge that by using Fire Spin. With Moltres, I have to rely on Peck a whole lot more than I think the other two legendary birds will. Fire Spin is not terrible because it is a trapping move, but it has really bad accuracy, and it takes a lot longer to knock a Pokemon out. I named Charmander Jelly Socks after Jelly Socks 4619. Thank you so much for the support in the comments. And with that, we can beat the rest of the required trainers in this area, and then we can pick up the SS Ann ticket and head over to Vermilion City. Now, as I mentioned, Misty is going to be a problem, so we're going to entirely skip her. We're not even going to attempt that fight until we're a higher level. Moltres doesn't get very many good TMs yet in this part of the game, and frankly, its move pool is actually really bad. I mean, it's got some really terrible moves like Razor Wind, Whirlwind. It's really not that great of a learn set at all. We pick up a few items on the SS Ann here on our way to the sailor we always fight. He's protecting the TM 44 Rest. Now this is one very useful TM that Moltres can learn. This fight actually gives me hope as well for Misty's fight, and Moltres handles it like a champ. We go against the rival again, and frankly this fight goes pretty much the same as before. Nothing on his team is terribly scary at this point. Moltres' base stats are just carrying it. Its moveset is still only Peck and Fire Spin really. I have Bide as well that I taught right away just in case, but we're not actually getting enough accuracy drops or experiencing enough problems where it's actually going to be useful yet. Right now, Peck really is carrying this moveset so far. We say goodbye to the SS Ann and watch it sail off into the sunset, and we can head over to Diglett's Tunnel in order to dig back to Cerulean City. It really makes you take into consideration where you heal and where you set your waypoints for each Pokemon Center. Going into the Misty fight, we have actually really good damage with Peck. I know that all of the legendary birds are going to use Peck a lot in these playthroughs, but we get very lucky in this fight with Misty. We don't take too much damage, there's not a lot of Bubble Beam or crits that happen. We have to make the long trek back now to Vermilion City on foot. Surge can be really strong, or he can be awful, depending on the luck you get with him. He doesn't have good AI, so he's just going to be picking his moves randomly, plus he has terrible accuracy with both Mega Punch and Mega Kick. Because of this, I wanted to try Surge just to see kind of where we're at and how it's feeling. The first try goes pretty poorly with a couple of lucky hits from Surge. And then the second time, I just get blasted right out of the air with Thunderbolt, so I don't think it's going to happen yet. Because of that, I pick up the bike voucher and dig back again to Cerulean City. Pick up the bike and head over toward Rock Tunnel. Against the Rapping Junior Trainer, we can just take her out so quickly because of Peck and Fire Spin's typing. This is a decent showing of the stab bonus for these moves where they shouldn't have a ton of power, but because of the great typing and stat, it actually works pretty well in some certain situations. One trainer we don't have a great answer for is the self-destructing Hiker. This guy has obviously 3 rock-type Pokemon that all resist my moves. Fire Spin will do okay damage since their special is so low, but the problem is with that 70% accuracy, if I miss and then get hit by a rock throw, that could be a really bad time. I do get reset once here, but actually make it through on my second attempt only, which is pretty lucky. Then in Celadon City, we go and pick up a bunch of items, including the TM for Razor Wind. This I really considered teaching for a moment. It could be useful considering Moltres' moveset is so limited, but what I decided to do instead is teach Double Edge. I go and sell all the items, and I'm just barely short from getting an extra vitamin, so I only get 4, 2 carbos and 2 protein. I pick up Fly and teach that to Jimmy. For now, I don't want to get stuck with that, so I'm being a little bit conservative. I feel like I should have just taught it. We head to Saffron and give the security guard a beverage that he can share, just 1 drink for some reason for 4 security guards. It's a little bit weird. They weren't apparently that thirsty. Surge goes much better now that we're a higher level. Plus with Double Edge, we have good reliable damage against Raichu. After Surge, we can finally fly around the map, and we can head over to the rival fight. And while we do not have great moves yet, we're still stuck with pretty much the same moves we had before. Now that we're a decent level, and the fact that we don't have any big weaknesses on his team really is still hugely helpful. The main worry is still sand attack stuff, but really not that big of a problem. Shelter doesn't even have any water moves yet. Eevee does have decent special, but Moltres is mostly relying on physical moves still at this point, so not really an issue at all. And as I leave the rival fight here, I finally decide just to teach Fly. It's going to be useful against the ghosts in the tower, as well as just dealing more damage than Peck at this point. After our brief little visit with Mr. Fuji and his special flute, we go ahead and head over to Erica's gym. In this grass-type gym, we're going to fight all of the optional trainers here. This is just going to be good, quick experience for Moltres. Remember, we are a slow growth rate, so we do need as much help as we can get there. And then we just knock out Erica's team super quickly. I mean, the type matchup here is just incredible for Moltres. Really no reason to put this off any longer. Erica's gym doesn't really help us a ton though. We go and pick up the TM for Swift. We also go to the Safari Zone to pick up Surf. I do need to go pick up Squirtle. I forgot to pick it up after we fought Surge that second time, or I guess third time if you count the resets. And we definitely need a surfing Pokemon. We named Squirtle Crim after Crim37. Thank you so much for being in the comments, being supportive, and watching the content. And then we head to Saffron City and fight the rival. Now we're only level 38 here, which is not awful, but it did take more experience than normal, and we're still below where I would like to be for this fight. We do still have Fire Spin for Sand Slash, which is helpful, and then Cloyster doesn't have great special, so Fire Spin still is the best option here. We just don't want to get hit by Aurora Beam because fire types do not resist ice moves in Gen 1, so that does still deal super effective damage. Magneton is going to be the most difficult part of this team, I think, as we get into this. The Kadabra isn't really an issue. Fly does great physical damage. And then Flareon is the same tactic. It can't really do much damage. Once we beat the rival, we can fight Giovanni, who should be an issue in theory, but actually is not that bad at all. While he does have a Rhyhorn, both the Nidoqueen doesn't have Thunder yet, and a lot of his Pokemon rely on Double Kick, which actually does not very effective damage to a flying type. So Moltres actually does pretty well, and honestly gets through this fight without too much problem. We do get hit by a Body Slam right at the end and get paralyzed, which could have been problematic, but we were already almost through the fight, so really a good time, if any, to get hit by that. I dig out a self and we head to Koga. Now Koga's going to be really excellently easy, so we can talk a little bit more about Moltres. While I really like the design, I know it's not the most popular Pokemon, but it is definitely the easiest to find since it's usually sitting in Victory Road, just right off the path from getting to the end of the game. I'm curious how many of you actually found Moltres compared to the other legendary Pokemon. I know Mewtwo is probably one of the fan favorite legendaries of all time, but it's another case of a legendary that's tucked away and not really in an obvious place. After I beat Koga, I can finally use Surf, and I can head down to Blaine's gym and the Pokemon Mansion. Blaine is going to be the most important gym leader for Moltres to beat, not only for the special boost, which is going to be super helpful at this point, also we're going to get Fire Blast after this fight. And that is going to be the best fire move that Moltres has access to. Unfortunately, in Gen 1, there is no TM for Flamethrower. So without that, we don't actually have a 100% accurate fire move that Moltres can even use. In fact, most of Moltres' learn set doesn't have great accuracy. Only a handful of these moves that it can learn, including Leer, Peck, Rage, Mimic, and Double Edge. It's really not a great set of options that have great accuracy. Luckily, because of our typing, Blaine is really not a problem. And once we have Fire Blast, we are finally getting to a place where Moltres can show its true power. Then we can head to Sabrina's gym. Now Moltres is pretty quick, however I am a little underleveled for this fight, so I don't outspeed all of her team. Luckily I can one-shot both Abra and Kadabra though, pretty easy, but she does have one other mechanic that's actually going to be difficult for Moltres, and that's the X Defend and Reflect from Alakazam. This is actually going to reduce the damage that Moltres does with Fly significantly, and that leaves me open to get hit by those strong psychic attacks that I do not resist, and she's actually able to take me down. So at this point, Moltres has 4 resets, which is a little tough. For a legendary Pokemon, it really is not performing the best. And as I'm beating Sabrina, I realize that my goal of getting under 1 hour with Moltres is quickly slipping away. We haven't even faced the biggest problem yet. But next up is Giovanni, and while I cannot take any damage from his ground type moves, I do have a huge weakness on this team. Actually, 3 of them. The 2 Nidos and the Rhydon. Both of the Nidos on his team have Thunder. And while they don't have Stab or really high special for that move, it does still do really good damage. Plus, a single Rock Slide hit from Rhydon will probably knock me out every time. So with that unfortunate fact, I think I need another option for Giovanni, and for that I go and pick up Mimic. Now I almost always grab Mimic in my playthroughs. This is an awesome option for both Giovanni, because I can steal Double Team from Persian or Earthquake from Dugtrio, as well as for multiple League members like Lorelei and Agatha, it's incredibly helpful. When I go back into Giovanni's fight and take Double Team and get all set up, I have a much better shot of getting through this fight. Thunder already has really bad accuracy, and even Rock Slide doesn't have great accuracy. It's still only 90% accurate. That really ensures that they will not hit me, and I can get through that fight with great damage from Fire Blast. But next up is the rival out here on Route 22. This fight can be a little rough. Now at this point he has Cloyster and Magneton, which combined can do incredible damage against Moltres. Luckily Magneton still only has Thundershock at this point, not Thunderbolt, but that will not be the case forever. On this first attempt, Moltres just takes a little too much damage and I get taken down. When I go back in, we learn another difficult lesson from Magneton, and that is the paralysis that it can cause. That can be really scary as well. It can deal even more damage than it would be able to because I might not be able to move, or it can go first, which are both big issues. But luckily, Double Edge does pretty good damage with that base 100 attack, and so I still have it on my moveset. It's not one of my favorite moves, but it's actually a really good option for Moltres. Another option that Moltres can rely on is Hyper Beam, but that's a little bit tricky in these speedruns to get. We finally make it to Victory Road and we can start pushing some rocks around. These little puzzles were always very interesting to me as a kid. I thought it was really fascinating that you could drop the rocks from floor to floor. Obviously I was playing these games at a very different time when the Game Boy Color was still kind of mind-blowing that it had, color. I do level up a few times with rare candies going into Lorelei because I am a little worried about the Slowbro Surf. But with Mimic, I can steal that Amnesia, which is going to be really helpful to prevent that damage, as well as the Hydro Pump damage out of Lapras. A really helpful thing here at Lorelei as well is that her ice types are weak to fire, so even when they're water and ice, I'll still do neutral damage with Fire Blast, which is by far Moltres' best move at this point. Because she also has good AI, Slowbro is only going to use water moves, but that does include Withdraw. It doesn't know that that doesn't deal damage, so it could actually just end up spamming a ton of Withdraw, which it does here, and allows me to set up with Amnesia. Once I'm set up, Surf doesn't do very much damage at all, and then Fire Blast can do incredible damage against Elastic Pokemon, or Jinx can also take a lot of damage from physical moves. Now I normally skip right past Bruno, but he is actually kind of a threat today in a couple of situations. Specifically, the Onix are the 2 situations, which shouldn't ever happen. Onix is really a bad Pokemon in Gen 1, it really is terrible, and without the evolution of Steelix that it gets later, it really isn't that scary at all. The only difference here is that they have Rock Slide, which is 4 times effective, and Moltres doesn't have the best defense, so they actually are still a threat. It is an option in this fight to steal Dig in order to do good damage against them, but with Fire Blast, I can just one-shot them actually. Even though it's not very effective, their special is so low that they're actually not a problem. Going into Agatha, I actually make a little bit of a misplay here. I do steal Substitute early on, and then I just start attacking, forgetting to set up Substitute, which was really dumb. I don't know exactly what happened there. My brain just kind of like, oh, I got Substitute. I can just start attacking now. I then realize my mistake once I get confused, and I can set it up after that, which will prevent further confusion, but was a little bit messy. After I beat the Golbat though, an important thing happens. I level up and I get access to Agility. Agility is an excellent badge boosting move. It can boost all of my stats, including speed obviously, but also because of the Gen 1 glitch, it will boost my attack and my special, which are going to be really helpful in the Agatha fight. So I do learn it in the place of Double Edge, because at this point Double Edge isn't going to be that important. Fly does more base damage, and normal type moves are not going to be that helpful against Lance or the champion. I don't think I actually needed Agility though. I think Rest would have just been a better investment in the long run. As I prepare for Lance, I do still have a bunch of rare candies, but I want to give it a couple of tries without, just in case, because I may get an extra level out if I do not level up before him. So I'm trying to give it a shot, but then I start to realize as I give it one attempt and then another, that Gyarados' Hydro Pump is going to be a massive hurdle. Now I knew this. I've previously done a run with Charizard, both in Pokemon Yellow and a randomizer. So I do have experience that Hydro Pump is a huge weakness for fire types at this point in the game. I was really trying to believe in Moltres though. It's a legendary Pokemon, has much better stats than Charizard. Maybe there's still a chance that I can get through this without just having to level a bunch. And after 10 resets, I finally do beat the Gyarados and get on to the rest of the team. But if you look at Lance's team, he's actually stacked against Moltres. Not only does Gyarados have Hydro Pump, which is massive damage, the next Dragonair has Thunderbolt and Thunder Wave. The one after that has Ice Beam, which is still super effective. So that's 3 Pokemon in a row that have great damage and some great statuses between Freeze and Paralyze. Those could quickly cost me the fight. At one point I try leveling up and see if that helps, and it helps a little bit. I'm definitely going to need those extra levels. At another point I teach Rest, which may be helpful if I was to get through these first 3 Pokemon and get to Aerodactyl, but really it doesn't help that much against these first 3, considering they can just knock me out even if I'm resting because they can do so much damage. Finally, when I'm already at 15 resets, I really think this through, and I know that I'm going to need level 62, which uses all my rare candies. I know I'm going to probably use Rest once I get to Aerodactyl. I really don't need Agility. Setting up against any of these 3 Pokemon at the beginning is just a bad idea. I want Mimic in order to steal Ice Beam, because I want to be able to take out Dragonite in a single hit and not get hit by Thunder or Hyper Beam. And I'm finally able to pull all that off. I can beat the first 3, get Ice Beam, and get to Aerodactyl, who's actually the least scary on this team, because Aerodactyl actually has no Rock-type moves in Gen 1. And then once you have Ice Beam, Dragonite is really not a problem at all. Now that I beat Lance though, it leaves me in an awkward spot level-wise. I'm almost level 63, but not quite. Heading into the champion, I do have Fire Blast, which is awesome, especially against Sandslash and against Exeggutor. Fly does really good damage against Alakazam. I'm finally getting to a place where I'm like, okay, I beat Lance. This is going to be easy now, right? But then I get put to sleep by Exeggutor and it starts using its stall and spam tactics. And then I look up at the time and realize I'm not even going to beat an hour and 15 with Moltres. Lance really threw a wrench in this whole thing. I was really hoping to get a decent time, but maybe this is proving that Moltres is not the best legendary. Maybe it's the worst in Gen 1. I have to assume that both Mewtwo and Mew can probably beat this time. Psychic types are awesome in Gen 1. And frankly, Ice type's really good in Gen 1, so Articuno might be really good. Zapdos might struggle. However, it's going to have really some strong points against Lance and against Lorelei. I could see it doing well too. I do get reset once against the champion. That was just me not really thinking through the entire fight as a whole and getting some good strategy. When I go back in the second time, I still Earthquake at the beginning instead of trying to steal a move later in the fight like Hypnosis or Thunderbolt. And that turns out to be a good idea because while I do have good damage against Sandslash and Alakazam and Exeggutor, Earthquake gives me much better damage against Magneton and the Flareon at the end. And then Cloyster can just honestly be taken down with Fire Blast. So with that, Moltres can finally finish the game with 16 resets, which is not that great at 1 hour, 16 minutes, and 12 seconds of real time played at 4 times game speed and an in-game time of 4 hours and 26 minutes. I will be trying a solo run with the other 2 legendary birds and then a secret one after that. Make sure to like and subscribe and keep an eye out for those videos coming in the next few weeks. I'll see you again soon. Have a wonderful day.